what they're going to try to force to do here is people to just do everything themselves. Like Tom, like eventually, I don't know, I might have to get a 3D printer and start printing my own clothes. I might not even be allowed to go and do local commerce. I don't know.
If you're not getting educated about local and national real estate market conditions and real estate news, you're doing yourself, your client base, a disservice, especially if you're in the real estate industry or advising people in any sort of fashion. This is the Knowledge Brokers Podcast. I'm Tom Toole here with Byron, Lazine, and we had a Fed CPI double whammy this week, and we've also got the MLS PIN standing up to the people in Washington, specifically the DOJ. I want to start with that, Byron. I find this very fascinating here. So on June 10th, the beginning of this week on Monday, the MLS Property Information Network, the MLS PIN, based out of Massachusetts, who is the defendant in the Nozelek case, which is one of the commission lawsuits that are happening right now, they filed some court documents, and they filed a statement of interest in the case suggesting that the court should consider an injunction that would prohibit sellers from making any offers of compensation to buyer brokers. And that was the DOJ. They filed that statement of interest. So the MLS PIN responded, and they said that the court should reject the DOJ's policy arguments. And they argued that the proposed settlement resolves the disputed antitrust conspiracy claim. So here's the quote, Byron. Even if DOJ walked back its support for a total ban on free market compensation offers and instead advanced a more measured proposal, for example, a ban on publishing compensation offers only on the MLS, it would remain true that the DOJ's position goes far beyond the requirements of antitrust law and abridges the MLS PIN's rights to publish compensation offers and to conduct lawful business in Massachusetts. They go on in this. I mean, it's basically a free speech argument here. And I love that another MLS is standing up to the DOJ here because they're arguing they're an intermediary in this and not one of the decision makers in the transaction, which is totally correct. We know that sellers and buyers are the decision makers. I'm interested to see what happens with this one, Byron. What's your reaction?
This is the third MLS now that has stood up, in whether, the first two that we really talked about was the Northwest MLS and the Bright MLS standing up and saying, no, we're not going, we're going to do things, this way when it comes to the concessions. Now you have this MLS, standing up into the DOJ, and I'll get into this part here, freedom of speech. But, it was funny. I was talking to a board, a CEO of a local board. I won't say what local board, so one of the local boards, not a state board. And this person asked me, like, what do you think's going to go on? You're seeing MLSs now stand up. I think there's going to be a lot of pushback. I'm like, well, I just don't think that the boards have as much control as the MLSs. So if there's anybody that has a position, I mean, even Zillow is a little bit beholden to MLSs. Even Zillow wants to protect MLS. So if there's going to be any leverage to be used, it will come from the MLSs, not the boards, and you can kind of get giddy as a board member or somebody who's leading the board that these things are happening. But that's why it's happening there, because that's where the control is. All right. So now going to this, Nozelek, this is a theory that's been floated out before. It's like, yeah, you're disrupting freedom of speech when you're going to restrict sellers' opportunities and buyers' opportunities in the market. So specifically sellers' freedom of speech, when they don't have the ability to articulate what type of offers they want to come with their property. They're making a presentation, my property's for sale. And if we're going to restrict them to doing it a certain way, aren't we taking things off the table? Aren't we taking, leverage that they have to get the home sold off the table when we do that? Aren't we providing less transparency when we do that, as opposed to giving them all the options possible? I think what the fear is for, whether it's the plaintiffs or the DOJ in this case, is that things start to look like they have looked. That the system ends up going back to what it was. And the reason for that is the market talks, meaning the market says, okay, what are the best ways for me to sell my house? And, oh, that's a great, I like that. I'm going to go do that. And just because the DOJ and plaintiffs don't like it doesn't mean it's not the best system available to them, or given all the opportunities like they've always had. Can go sell your house for sale by owner, can go do an entry only listing, can sell it for you know, with a number of different brokers, can negotiate commission. They have all these opportunities available to them, can offer no compensation, can all these opportunities available to them. But if the majority of people pick one option through their right to be able to sell the house the way that they want to do it, it might end up looking like the old way. Well, just like Warren Buffett said, he's looked at the system. It's one that's worked. It works. It makes a lot of sense. It's probably didn't need a whole heck of a lot of changing. And so I think they're going to get, frustrated with the fact that, oh, gee, the marketplace actually likes the system that's in place right now. The ability at least to have the option to say, hey, I want to offer comp to the buyers because I want to create as competitive as an environment as I possibly can. That may not be the option everybody takes, and it won't be, as it hasn't been.
Well, you're absolutely right. And the court of public opinion is going to be the real judge here, Byron. We've been saying that all along. I mean, you look at when this settlement happened and now all these MLSs pushing back. I mean, and there's actually 4 of them. The CRMLS is also in the same category as Bright with their concessions that they're offering. And when you have all this stuff happen, a lot of buyers, like I've been in on buyer consults. I've been on seller meetings. I'm sure I know you have as well. They're like, this is stupid. I mean, I've heard this from people like, oh, now great. It costs me more money. But and you think about the logistics behind all this, and so we had I'm part of Bright MLS, so they had that story that came out where they're going to allow concessions, and one is buyer brokerage compensation. Now they have an attorney coming out saying, well, we're not sure if we can actually do this. I mean, this is going to go on, and this is really going to shake out here very interestingly. But to your point, remember, like, they introduced buyer agency in the 1990s for a reason. Like, it wasn't some fly-by-night idea. My dad's been doing this since the 70s. This was to protect people and to make clear relationships. So we're seeing that most sellers are still compensating. People, you're right. People have always had the option not to compensate a buyer agent. We have builders here that offer out $500 offers of comp on $700,000 homes. That doesn't sound like much compensation to me. So I like what MLS PIN's doing here. I mean, we're seeing these couple influential MLSs stand up, and you're right, they've got all the leverage.
Rob Hahn wrote in his Substack, Notorious R.O.B, that there are 4 main arguments being made by MLS PIN. He says, number 1, this is a settlement, not a decision on the merits, and the rule changes resolve any antitrust concerns. So that's the first thing. MLS PIN number 2 is a mere conduit. That's what you mentioned earlier. A platform for communicating offers of compensation, which is perfectly legal and constitutionally protected commercial speech. Number 3, MLS PIN cannot actively prohibit offers of comp, as doing so would be an actual antitrust violation. And number 4, the DOJ is engaging in policy work instead of enforcement of the law. It's because the DOJ has a mandate clearly from the current administration to just go out there and break stuff. Anything that looks too big, anything that feels like it might have, really any system that's working, you go down the line. I think I mentioned this on last week's pod. The DOJ just wants to break everything right now. It's a little bit crazy, and you may not have the same influence on the DOJ after November. Maybe you do. There's probably, I guess, a 50-50 chance that things could change. So some of this might be going away very soon. And I think a lot of business people would probably applaud that but they've been very disruptive for pro business, for moving business forward, trying to create the rules to the game And that's what they're doing. They're trying to do policy work instead of enforcing what laws actually exist, what laws are being broken, if any.
So you're absolutely right about this. MLS PIN, excuse me, pointed out that the current administration already directed the FTC, who shares responsibility over antitrust with the DOJ, to exercise its rulemaking authority, quote, in areas such as unfair occupational licensing restrictions, unfair tying practices, or exclusionary practices in the brokerage or listing of real estate, and any unfair industry specific practice that substantially inhibits competition. So, I mean, you're absolutely right there. This is coming from a direct order from the current administration. And I do agree with you. I think a lot of business owners are feeling under the gun right now because they're being told, hey, this is how you got to do things. We're going to disrupt how things have been working, when even the consumers are. I mean, buyers aren't happy about this. Buyers aren't happy of the idea of having to pay an additional commission. I mean, I don't, it's we've seen some people do it, but they don't want that extra cost on them. And a lot of times they don't even have the money. The VA just had to come out, and their circular got issued this week. I don't know if you saw that, Byron, that
I did.
they're now allowing veterans. They had to change a rule that was to benefit veterans for serving our country, right? And they have a very advantageous financing package. I'm a big proponent of that. We've worked a lot of VA loans here, and now they're saying it's okay, but it's a temporary order. Why is it temporary? I mean, that's a great question. Why not just make this the rule if this is going to be the way things go? Maybe the VA knows something we don't.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Or the VA is just saying, you know what, we're going to actually do the right thing and protect veterans.
I hope that's the case. I mean,
And
I'm glad they came out and did something. I mean, that's important.
yeah, I mean, I think that's their job. So that, like, all this other noise that's going on, they're like, you know, we're just going to go do the right thing here. And there was a lot of noise going on that the people who should be worried, and this is the conversation I had with the board CEO, the people who should be worried are um, the people on, I mean, the people in these local boards should be worried. The brokers who aren't training their agents every single day should be worried. But the people that are closest to the customer aren't going to be worried. And closest to the customer could mean you, the knowledge broker, working the deal every single day. It could also mean the Zillows of the world who are extremely close to the customer. But those who are closest to the customer are not going to be worried about all the noise, are not going to be fearful of this change because they know something that everybody else is forgetting. Customers need, want, desire the service to navigate through a very complicated market, a complicated market that continues to evolve and change. Florida right now feels very different than the Northeast. Louisiana feels very different than California. And there are all these different market dynamics that are happening and taking shape. There are buyer markets all of a sudden in this country, Texas and Florida being two of them, while there are still seller markets in this country. And buyers and sellers, we're in a time now where people move to different states frequently. That seems to be more normal than staying maybe in one state. A great professional real estate broker agent in their corner is something that they're going to need. That being said, if they're not up and ready to meet the challenge, knowing what to say, when to say it, when that time presents itself on August 17th, knowing how to navigate these concerns, do it ethically, they're going to get left behind. Okay. And that's just the way it is. And some people are just waiting for some savior, which also isn't coming. You're going to have to work through this. You're going to have to create new ways to really speak to that customer and make sure that they feel comfortable and have all the information at their fingertips. And that's why I have such a big thing against this DOJ doing this. You're taking away, and you're taking away what does appear to be constitutionally protected commercial speech, the ability to offer compensation. It's always been legal. It's always been permissible. And it's been beneficial, right? So it's been beneficial to the DOJ. It's been beneficial to Fed, it's just, it seems idiotic to even go there where you're like, no, sellers, you're just not allowed to do that. Like, you're going to make what they're going to try to force to do here is people to just do everything themselves. Like, Tom, like, eventually, I don't know, I might have to get a 3D printer and start printing my own clothes. I might not even be allowed to go and do local commerce. I don't know.
You know, Jimmy Mackin said something, and I agree with you. I think this whole thing doesn't make any sense, and the consumers are gonna make the decision here by their actions and what they offer out, both sellers and buyers. If sellers continue to do that, and if buyers are willing to pay, what you said there was so important. Jimmy Mackin put out this tweet this week, and it segues nicely into the Fed meeting and the CPI data. And he said, for the last 3.5 years, we told ourselves a story, we meaning the real estate industry. If only we had more inventory, everything would be easier. Well, it turns out we're getting what we asked for. All across the country, inventory is rising. And with rising inventory comes longer sales cycles, higher costs for managing our listings, and don't forget the lingering fear that at any moment you can get fired by your client for not selling their home for a price that's 20% above market value. I don't totally agree with that because we have contracts that we enter into. That's another story. Here's the lesson. The determining factor on whether or not you will be successful in this industry isn't inventory, interest rates, or the market. You could group the DOJ and the NAR settlement right in there. You're in control. Jerome Powell is not going to save you. You are. Let's get to work. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Byron, because for every person that's waiting for a savior right now, I'm hearing case studies of, we just had our best month ever. We just had a killer month. I put X amount of homes under contract. So there's opportunity out there. There always is. And when you run your business like a business, right? I think you have a quote that said part-time real estate agents are full-time assholes is what you had said. And well, imagine you're a buyer and you're writing a check right now. Look, you can qualify this in a second. Imagine you're paying a buyer agent. You know, I pay part-time people less than I pay full-time people. That's how commerce works, right? I mean, that's how workers work. So there's a lot to really think about here about how you're running your business and how you're taking control, because we're getting into a shifting market right now. And I mean, we've seen what's happened with new agents that got into the business 2020, 21, 22. Some of them didn't renew their licenses here in Pennsylvania at the May 31st deadline. So I love what Jimmy said here, and I think that's a really great way to look at your business right now in the face of this NAR adversity and what's going on with, you know, the Fed changing their stance on rate cuts, which we're going to get into a second. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I will react to Jimmy's tweet, which is great. My tweet that you're referring to from a while back, part-time agents are full-time assholes, it is not talking about the agent who is transitioning into the business.
100% agree with that. Let me just go on record and say that here.
And I know you do. And who's willing to Elon Musk it for a little bit and work 80 hours a week and do all the things. I'm talking about the agent who holds a license to do 2 deals a year, to cherry pick a couple, like convince somebody, a coworker, a friend to list with them who's not engaged on all of the changes, how to stay ethical, what the market is really doing, just wants to be a door opener and cash a couple extra checks a year. It's almost like, you know, stealing money out of the tip jar at Starbucks or something, acting like you're putting $1 to pull out 10. You know, that's kind of what they're doing. Anyways, Jimmy's stuff is so true because, you know, you wish for different. I mean, I can't imagine how many times, Tom, everybody has heard during the 2001, 22, 21, 22 rather, a couple of years ago. I can't wait till we have more inventory. Can't wait till we have more inventory. Now, will the markets that have gotten hit with those inventory increases, Austin's prices are down 18.7% since their 2022 price peak. I know we've set Case-Shiller, we've set records on price, but you got to be careful what you wish for, to Jimmy's point. Or I'll say you got to be careful to what you wish for. Jimmy's saying, hey, you know, these shifts are inevitable. You got to keep doing things and building the brand and all that stuff. But Austin down 18.7%. Those are harder conversations when you're going to list one of those homes. New Orleans is down 13.7% on pricing since the 22 peak. Lake Charles, Louisiana, down 11.7% since 22 peak. Boise down 10.4%. Idaho Falls down 9.7%. Chico, California down 8.8%. San Francisco down 8.2%. Punta Gorda in Florida is down 7.8%. Some of the highest inventory increases in the country. Phoenix is down 7.3% since the 22 peak. When you have these inventory increases and demand is less than it was in 23 and far less than it was in 22, eventually price will give in. I'm not saying you're going to have double digits like you've seen in New Orleans and Austin in all parts of the country. That's very unlikely. But you will have a flattening of prices. You can't just keep setting the record. It's why something I've been talking about on the hot sheet is if you're pricing a house to sell this weekend, why are you looking at April's record sale in the neighborhood? What does April's record sale in the neighborhood or March's record sale in the community have to do with creating a competitive environment on Father's Day and selling the house for as much money as you can this weekend? Those two things have very little to do with each other. What was the competition like in your market in March? It could be less than what the competition is now, could be more. It's likely in most parts of the country, more competition, more homes are competing, and there's more inventory this weekend. Okay, now the demand for that product. Is the demand higher or lower here on Father's Day weekend when we have high school graduation distractions, when we have mortgage applications declining? Oh, no, this week it did bump up, but I'm talking about from March till today.
Sure. Yes.
Mortgage
yes.
applications have been on the steady decline. I know this week they did bump up a little bit because we got down to 7%, thankfully. What's the situation this weekend? There's certainly more distractions. Okay, you've got the golf tournament, you've got Father's Day, you've got graduations, you've got summer kicking off, you got people opening up the beach houses, people doing some gardening, you've got all of that happening. You've got a spring market that in most markets is now over. You have less mortgage applications over the last 3 months than you did prior, and you might have more competition. So when you're sitting across the table from a seller, those points right there are really important to check off in your market so that every seller you're sitting with isn't taking aspirational pricing as their go-to-market price. We can go for aspirational price, which is yesterday's record, or we can get in line with what's going to move the fastest in this current market, this weekend, next weekend, into July. There's a different price there, and you're going to put more money in your seller's pocket by keeping this on a normal 30-day run on the market, as opposed to what I'm seeing in South Florida where people aren't moving price and they're going 120 days, 150 days, 180 days on market now, really starting to rack up those DOMs. That's going to have a greater impact on the actual sales price when they go ahead and finally realize where they're at. It's going to be a lot lower because of those DOMs.
Before we jump into the Fed, I've got a strategy here everyone can use to clearly show that to home sellers. And I find that the market analysis often gets glossed over by a lot of agents. They try to win on personality instead of win on data and strategy, which has worked really well for me. I know it's worked well for you, Byron. So you go over your sales report, and I never recommend using like the MLS pre-done CMAs. They're garbage. Like, come up with something you can talk through. And you go over the actives, right? Here's your competition. You show days on market. Anything above like 30 or 60, that's a market rejected property because it hasn't sold yet. You got to look at your average time on market. Then you go over the pendings. And in our market, I don't know, every MLS is different. They show the asking price at the time the home went under contract. Well, that shows you where the market's going. So if you're seeing a number of pendings at 550, 575, 580, then you know kind of the trigger point, right? You know where what's getting buyers' attention. And then you go over the solds and you go over and then you got to adjust for time. Like if something sold in January or February, that's a long time ago at this point. So you go over all this, but then you take these line items of the three groups, right? The one line report on the MLS. So you got your actives, you got your pendings, and you got your solds. And I would actually mark this up and say, all right, so here's the solds. Here's where we're seeing movement. And it's this bracket in the market. And our market works in $25,000 and $50,000 increments, depending on the price point. So hey, you can see here, once you get above that 590 number, we're not seeing any activity till about 650. But we got all these sales at 550, 575, 580. That tells me the market's moving in this direction, and you're creating a visual for the seller. And then you show that to them, and then it creates a much different approach than here's the record sale price. I totally agree with you, because there's always those outliers, right? You get a buyer that's in the screw it phase. They lost out on 4 homes. They may just want to get the place at this point. So
Absolutely.
you got to be very aware of that. I'm a big believer in the visual and showing the data and breaking it down simply, because I think a lot of times these market analysis are way too complicated for consumers.
We talked about this when you and I did the live on the role playing live,
Mhm.
where it's like, hey, I got no problem with any agent out there going and listing homes at a seller's aspirational price.
Mhm.
They're the ones taking on the risk. Okay. I mean, you're taking on the risk too. I get it, in the marketing dollars and all of that. And so you've got to protect yourself with a contract that makes sense for you, for what you're investing into the property and into the marketing, and into your sales efforts and all of that. Totally get it. You got to have a long enough contract if you're going to go aspirational prices. Okay. That's a decision that you've got to make in your
Mhm.
business. Well, I've got no problem with people signing up clients for aspirational prices, because sometimes the seller just doesn't want to have a regret. What I have an issue with is, if you're a knowledge broker, not doing what Tom just said, showing, hey, at aspirational price, here's our chances of sale. Over here, where the market is moving towards right now, chances go way up, pool goes way up, or below. You've got 3 options to sell your property. You can sell it at aspirational, yesterday's record price. You could certainly list it today, where the majority of the buyers are not only shopping, but putting properties under contract. Or we could even move to where the market's moving tomorrow, which might even be a touch lower, which could even, because we're going to be early adopter of this new price, it could actually push your price up in the meantime, creating a competitive bidding situation for you. So as long as you go ahead and give them all the options, they choose aspirational, fine. You've done your job giving them all opportunity available to them, which is something that the DOJ would probably disagree with when you're sitting at the kitchen table, because they don't like options and opportunity and transparency and
I don't think they
people,
like anything.
they
I mean, they're
don't,
just
they
a
don't
bunch
like
of curmudgeons.
themselves.
Yes. All right, so we had a Fed meeting, Byron. Double whammy this week. CPI data and the Fed meeting all at once. So, knowledge brokers, I'm sure you were paying attention. So, we started off by the Fed keeping the federal funds rate where it is, as expected. No surprise there. The big news coming out of this is Jerome Powell and his comments. And they adjusted their strategy, saying, hey, you can only expect 1 rate cut this year, as opposed to the projected 3. And that was something that I think sent the market moving a little bit. We also saw the CPI data held flat, but it was 0.1% below expectation, up 3.3% since last May. We saw core CPI was up 0.2% compared to estimates of 3 to 3, 0.3 to 0.35%. So that was below expectation, up 3.4% since last May. The Dow reacted favorably. The 10-year fell to 4.27 right after the meeting, down 0.14% from where it was. And, so that was some good news about the CPI data. The Fed also came out and with their dot plot, which is all the members of the Federal Reserve, they put expectations on there. It's a pretty interesting chart. And they are anticipating more aggressive rate cutting in 2025, but the cycle is likely to be shorter. So very interesting Fed meeting here. Very interesting comments, Byron. What's your reaction to all this?
My reaction is really unchanged. I mean, we're seeing movement in the market day to day based on, last Friday's jobs report. 10-year goes up. CPI Wednesday, 10-year comes down. Some other good numbers come out this week on inflation. PPI was also strong, right? So to your point, we've seen the 10-year coming down. We're actually, we're recording this Friday morning. The 10-year's at 4.2. The 30-year's been under 7 the last 2 days on Mortgage News Daily at like 6.98. So basically at 7, but better than 7.17, which it was
Yeah.
to start the week. But my thoughts on where the Fed is going is completely unchanged because Jerome Powell said it himself.
Yes.
Really, and here's a direct quote. Alternative, we see unexpected weakening in the labor market. Okay, so unless they see this, meaning unless they see unexpected weakening, okay, in the labor market, like to the extreme, they're not going to shift on cutting these rates rapidly, which means they're going to be higher for longer. Okay. He was asked a question from Nancy Marshall Genzer from Marketplace saying, you know, will you cut rates with shelter prices high, or will you wait to start to moderate? He says housing prices going up or down has no impact on what they're going to do. The overall test is moving down to 2% inflation, or if there's weakening in the job market, they'd have to react to that because that goes back to what their mandate is: 2% inflation and maximize employment. So unless you see a lot of people losing jobs, and I've been really on this one a lot. If you've got somebody in front of you saying, I'm going to wait for the rates to come down, totally understand why you might be considering that as a great opportunity for you. Totally get it. Everybody that locked in the last couple of years is really thankful for those rates. What experience do you have with rates coming down in the last 25 years, right? And you walk them through the two things that moved rates down. One for a prolonged period was the Great Financial Crisis. You had an 8-year period of 4% rates. It took us that long to recover. And then the other thing that really moved rates down was COVID. So in order for rates to move down again, just based off of the last 25 years, we're really waiting for some big black swan event economically. We're waiting for job loss. Okay. We had high concerns in the beginning of COVID of people losing their jobs. A lot of people did, right? Then the economy took off because we printed so much money. Obviously in 09 and 10 and 11, we had high unemployment years. We were recovering from the financial crisis. Those two were catalysts for these low interest rates environment. We're not going to get there unless we have another bad catalyst. The rates aren't just going to come down to 4% for no reason. Inflation would take off again. And the Fed knows this. So if you're comfortable waiting maybe 2-3 years, or on the other hand, you're actually waiting for massive job loss, right? Those are the things you're waiting for. And then you get into one step further. What likely, if we don't have massive job loss, if we're going for like the best case scenario of all time, job market continues to grow and rates come down, do you think we'll have more competition or less competition on those homes? Like, are the home prices going to shoot up to aspirational prices again? Yeah, and the answer is of course.
So you bring up some great points there. And I mean, we said the same thing to folks a little more clearly and concisely. But I mean, what Byron said there, that's how you got to be able to explain this stuff. Because
that's not a script, by the way. I'm just talking it through.
No, this is real life. And you know what's going to happen is you got to understand all that stuff and then digest it into a script. But if you don't know everything about this, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And you know, you look at some of these quotes here. The NBA chief economist came out and said we're going to see a shorter rate cutting cycle than we have in the past. The end of 2024, the federal funds rate target is 5.1%. We're at 5.25 to 5.5 right now. 4.1% in 2025. So we're not going to see massive cuts, but maybe some more measured ones. And we also have, Chucky Reddy from QED Investors. He's talking about signs of inventory building. And remember, 2019 was not like a bad market. This is it was still an inventory short market, just not as short as we are right now. And seeing all this stuff, I mean, to your point, Byron, you got to take that and say, hey, so, you know, you want to wait for rates to come down. So can I tell you why that makes me nervous? And then they'll say yes. And hey, so if rates come down, don't you think there's other people waiting for rates to come down too? And it's going to be a lot more competitive. Like that's what you want to say to people. And all these things here, the Fed's doing, and it's really clear. 2% inflation is still the target. They are not giving up on that. That was really the answers when I went through the whole transcript of the press conference. that's when the Fed's going to claim success. And they need to see a few months of this in a row, not just like a one-off CPI that came in lower than expectation. You've got to have this conversation with people. Fannie Mae revised their rate predictions. I mean, they were ahead of the game a little bit here based on this. So I think it is more of the same. I'm glad that the Fed finally came out and said, hey, we're not cutting rates 3 times, because I feel like there were some people holding out hope for that. You've talked about the people that said, 5s by the end of the year. That ain't happening.
No.
And we said a long time ago on the pod, survive until 25. I am clear that is the same mindset here, but I take it back to that Jimmy Mackin tweet, right? Jerome Powell's not going to save the day here. We've got to go out and find the people that need guidance and go out and market yourself as the expert. Hey, in spite of all this, I'm still getting great prices for my clients. In spite of all this, inventory shortage, rate challenges, I'm helping people find homes. And I'd love to show you how I can help you in the same way. And that comes down to someone that knows what's going on in the economy, that understands how to articulate all this Fed data, because this can overcomplicate. You ever tried to explain this to somebody that doesn't know anything about the Fed, Byron? It's tough, right? Like you've got to break it down in simple terms, and that's where scripting, practice, listening to podcasts like this, that's where it really helps you build your skills, because we are going into a skill-based market. There is no question about it. This reminds me very similarly of '08, different conditions, but hey, I have to change how I'm doing business based on what happened in the past, because the market was helping me be successful. Now I've got to make myself successful.
Yeah, it's similar to those time frames. What do you think's a harder market, right, for agents right now or back then?
Back then, and I'll tell you why. People still have intent right now. I was in both. I mean, there's
That's a
people
good point.
that, there's buyers that want to get in, right? I think the hardest client to work is not the seller that's overly ambitious on their price, because listings are a lot easier to service. Harder to get, very hard to get, but easier to service. It's the buyer that has too many options and can't make a decision. And they may see stuff they like, but showing someone 20, 30 homes, and also the technology back then was not where it is now. I mean, you had to go through a lot more properties than you do, just because like digital photography was a new thing back at that time. I mean, it's kind of wild.
We had you're right, because we had so much inventory that you could be priced perfectly, and the seller's like, why are there no showings or one show? And it's because your point was there was such an abundance of opportunity for the few buyers that were out there, that it created a, like, they froze up. They would make this, it take them a long time to make a decision, because you just have too many options to work through. But I do think that this is a very challenging market.
Agreed. Yeah.
Based on these low sales, and the low sales numbers are, you go back to 1978. We're a 1978 time frame here on total sales, and we had 100 million more people now. So we'll keep watching what the Fed's doing, but I think it's more just to really explain to people to take that action that they should be taking, and help them make the right decision and navigate the right decision in their life. Not necessarily, obviously, to get some type of rate cut or headwind there. This is going to be a grinded out adverse market. What was Tom Brady had a great quote about getting through adversity. He was just mentioned or nominated into the New England Patriot Hall of Fame this week. I'm sure you were tuned into that, Tom.
I actually did watch the part where Jay-Z is opening up for Tom Brady. Like, that is baller status. Like, who's your opener? Jay-Z is my opener. So that is incredible.
But he talks about, relating football to life, all the adversity, all the pain, all the hardship. I'm completely paraphrasing here, but that's what you're going through. That's what you're in right now. And that season, that cloud over the market is going to continue to hover. It does mean more listing appointments, more buyer consultations, all of that, to be able to serve people and serve the business the way that you want to do it. So I'll leave you guys with that.
Great spot to end it.
Tom, I think we'll have Lisa back next week, but maybe not you.
Maybe not me is right. It's tentatively a no, but I like to give out my RSVPs well in advance so you know what to expect.
That's right. So we'll see you guys next week on Knowledge Brokers Pod. We know that in 2024, your business operations will be more important than ever. Once I figured this out, my business was able to scale and take off. See, generating leads is one thing, but getting that deal across the finish line while keeping everyone happy is another story. Enter Mosaic, everything you need once a lead becomes a client. Mosaic picks up where CRMs leave off to streamline the client experience and maximize your productivity. It's the operating platform that gives agents and teams everything they need to stay organized and proactive throughout the entire transaction process and beyond. Transaction management, forms, AI-powered collaborative search, client retention capabilities, and advanced analytics for your business. In other words, you can use Mosaic to create a powerful flywheel for your business. It will help you close every deal, boost your profitability, and generate more repeat and referral business. If you need a better way to run your business, check out the link below and learn how Mosaic can help you today. At BAMX, we listen to what real estate professionals want and need. That's why our platform is filled with sought-after courses, content, and tactical assets for your business. And that's why we launched BAMX in a box with templates and scripts done for you, delivered each Friday. The best part? It's not coming from panel pontificators who bought their followers and don't sell any real estate. It's coming from top agents, team leaders, and content creators in the industry. It's education that actually shows you how to do what you need in today's market. And now it includes editable templates and scripts so you can easily deliver that knowledge to your database. Every day, we continue to add more content into BAMX, into our private Facebook community, content that works, content that our members have exclusive access to daily. Do not wait any longer. Use code Knowledge Brokers and join the thousands of agents taking their business to the next level today. Use Knowledge Brokers for 10% off. See you in BAMX.